It was here at the alley behind the Badlander Bar where Jermain Charlo, a 23-year-old Native American woman from Dixon, was last confirmed to be alive. Since then, her case has remained an active investigation with the Missoula Police Department. It's been 3 years and the case remains unsolved. Guy Baker is the second detective to be in charge of this missing persons case. 11 days after Jermain was last seen, he was reassigned and now works to solve.
I continue to follow up leads, working on things actually just yesterday. So it's not a closed case, it's not a cold case, it's still very active.
Baker continues to stay in touch with Jermain's family to keep them in the loop. But many caveats of his research are unreleased, he says, to protect the investigation's integrity. And he stands by his work for Jermain, who he says is the only missing Native American woman in Missoula.
I think you always look to the past to see if you can do better. You try to do the best job you can under the circumstances, but, looking back, some things could have been done a little differently that I think would have been beneficial, but nothing was done wrong or was detrimental, I should say, to the investigation.
Media undoubtedly plays a role here. Gimlet Media, a division of Spotify, released a podcast documenting the case this year. Baker is prominently featured in the reporting.
An issue that comes up between the public and law enforcement is perception. And what everyone's perception is to them is reality, when in fact it may not be actual reality. So the podcast was not entirely accurate. So people have listened to that and they have drawn some conclusions that might not be entirely correct. So
Baker told MTN News that sometimes the police are not in a position to correct the record. That could jeopardize an investigation and would not clarify what those facts were. Last year, Connie Walker was on the ground in Missoula doing her own investigation.
There's never been a request from the Missoula Police Department or Guy Baker to correct anything in our podcast.
Walker, an Indigenous Cree woman from Canada, documented the case in the 8-episode Stolen: The Search for Jermain.
I've actually been hearing from so many people in and around Missoula who knew of Jermain or knew of people in the podcast, and I'm continuing to have those conversations. I am really hoping to do more reporting on Jermain's case as soon as we can.
The podcast reached an international level, resonating with Indigenous communities primarily, but also those unaware of MMIP.
This crisis of violence that like so many Indigenous women and girls face, and men and boys in Canada and in the United States.
To Walker, her work isn't just a job. Her Indigenous community also experiences a height of violence.
For me, getting to learn about Jermain's life through her family and friends has been such a privilege and an honor, and I treat it as a responsibility.
Something echoed between Walker and Baker, more information is out there.
For all of the reporting that we've been able to do, obviously it's great to raise awareness about Jermain's case on a national level or international level, but I think that it's particularly important that people there in her community are also paying attention and know the story of Jermain's story and that her disappearance is still unsolved.
In Missoula, Geneva Zoltek, MTN News.